Hockey is known as one of the fastest games on Earth, with players flying around on blades of steel, reaching speeds of 20 miles per hour, smashing into each other, and shooting pucks at over 100 miles per hour. With all that speed comes one of the most unique events in all sports, the hockey fight. Unlike other sports, in hockey, players are encouraged to square up and go toe-to-toe, punching each other and usually ending with at least one player face down on the ice. It's not for the faint of heart, but it is a big draw for both the casual and hardcore fans alike, and is a key component to the momentum and strategy of the sport. Today, we will break down how fighting became a part of hockey, some of the best fighters and most famous fights in history, and where fighting fits into the game today. Hockey has been a physical sport since its origins in the 1800s. Hitting, slashing, and fighting have been natural additions to the sport with its high-flying, competitive nature. Early hockey was known to get too violent, and there were actually 4 players in the year 1904 alone that were killed by violent brawls and stickwork. By the time the National Hockey League was the controlling body of the sport, they knew they had to have some way to control the game. So, in 1922, they implemented specific rules on fighting. In the original rulebook, the term they used was actually fisticuffs. And rather than ejecting players and suspending them as most other amateur leagues would do, they imposed a 5-minute major penalty to anyone that fought. The NHL believed that promoting fighting would be a great marketing tool to grow the game, as boxing was one of the biggest sports in the world at the time. And violence was a great way to get people's attention. Fighting also allows the game to police itself, so that incidents such as the deaths in 1904 don't happen. It's what's known as the code in hockey, and it basically states that if you do something out of line during the game, then you're going to have to face the consequences. If you slash someone, hit them too hard or from behind, especially when it's a star player, expect someone to be waiting for you with their gloves off, and if you're not ready, that's on you. The NHL and its players simply believe that while fighting is violent and dangerous, if you remove it from the sport, then you're going to have injuries that are much worse. If players do not have to face the consequences of their actions, they will be more likely to hit players more dangerously and be more violent with their sticks, and there could be unintended ramifications as a result. The players that are known to act as the so-called police are known as enforcers or goons, and are some of the toughest players to ever lace up skates. Bob Probert, Tigers Williams, Ty Domi, Dale Hunter, Georges Laraque. They are big names in the sport, and not because they put the puck in the net. These were some of the most feared men in the game, and you always knew when they were on the opponent's bench. The strategy of having a big-time enforcer was that if you saw them across from you, you were much less likely to give that extra hit or cross-check, and you were always looking over your shoulder to see if they were coming up behind you. It was enough to get you off your game, because they knew that if you stepped out of line, there would be hell to pay. Teams would even try to build entire rosters of tough guy enforcers, and the Philadelphia Flyers were the most successful to do so. Their teams in the 1970s were known as the Broad Street Bullies, and they fought, intimidated, and bullied their way to 3 straight Stanley Cup Finals appearances. At the time, it changed the way that the entire NHL would look at building their squads, and those Flyers were influential to the overall history of the NHL. Often, 2 enforcers will fight each other to try to give their teams some energy or swing the momentum of the game into their favor. These are known as staged fights and can often look like they start out of nowhere. 2 combatants will often just skate around a bit, chatting or trash-talking each other until they drop the gloves and square off. Sometimes it happens off a face-off, where both players line up beside each other and drop the gloves as soon as the puck drops. This is enough to send the crowd into a frenzy, as they know they are about to see 2 of the best fighters on the ice throw haymakers at each other. The players do this for many reasons. They may just love to fight and feel like beating the other gives them a sense of pride or establishes dominance. They may do it to wake up their team if they're losing. It might not make sense for fans that have never played the sport, but a one fight can turn the tide of a game very quickly. And often a team that is down by 2 or 3 goals can be sparked by a fight, enough to come back and win the game, or even a playoff series. Every now and then, fans will get treated to not just one fight, but a full-on 5 versus 5 brawl, or even a bench-clearing brawl where both teams empty onto the ice with a 20 versus 20 rockin' Donnybrook mayhem. These were more common in the past, with a lot of famous brawls in the 70s and 80s, and even the 90s, but they still happen today. Looking back, you can find tons of brawls between rivals such as the Canadiens, Bruins, Islanders, Flyers, and Oilers. With so much going on at once, it's pretty pretty much impossible for the officials to break it up, and they basically just have to let the players go until they get too tired and give up. One famous incident at an international game between Canada and the USSR in 1987 got so bad that the rink attendants had to turn the lights off to try to stop the fighting. Another famous brawl in 1979 had the Boston Bruins jumping up into the stands at Madison Square Gardens and fighting the fans. One Bruins forward, Mike Milbury, even went so far as to beat a fan with his own shoe. One of the more recent famous rivalries occurred in the late 90s, when the Colorado Avalanche and Detroit Red Wings squared off in multiple brawls after a violent hit by the Avs' Claude Lemieux on Chris Draper. These included a couple of goalie fights by Patrick Waugh that are still reminisced by fans to this day. Today, hockey fights are happening less and less. In fact, there were just 224 fights in the 2018-19 season, the last full NHL season. That is down from 280 the year before, and the number of fights for each season has actually dropped every year since 2008-9. Over that 10-year span, fighting has dropped 70%, a sign that fighting may be on its way out of the game. A lot of non-professional leagues are now trying to curb fighting with rules like receiving a suspension after 3 fights in the Ontario Hockey League. The British Columbia Hockey League only allows 2 fights before supplemental discipline. Having these rules in junior leagues has a trickle-up effect on the professional leagues. If junior teams no longer have a roster spot for an enforcer, then these enforcers aren't going to be getting drafted and signed to professional leagues. If you add in the general awareness of concussions and the mental health issues that stem from continuously fighting, it is just another strike against fighting in hockey. The sport on the ice has also changed with an increased preference for speed, athleticism, and goal scoring. Rather than placing value on a big enforcer that isn't as good at skating but can beat anyone up in a fight, these roster spots are hard to come by, and it's no longer as important to use one of these spots on a fighter. Instead, you are looking for a player that can do both. He must be able to play physically and fight when he needs to, while still being able to play the game well and contribute to the team. The NHL has also tried to reduce fighting a bit by implementing the instigator rule. It states that a player that is deemed to be the instigator of a fight with an unwilling combatant will receive an extra 2-minute penalty and a game misconduct on top of their 5-minute fighting major. It's not called often, but the idea is that it reduces the ability for an enforcer to police the game. If there's a dirty hit, it's not as easy for the other team to make anyone face the consequences for that hit. The enforcer has to have a willing opponent, or he may receive a huge penalty and hurt his team even further. So, while fighting has been reduced over the years, it is still a crucial part of the sport. It helps players police the on-ice play so that the opposition doesn't give cheap shots or dirty hits. An increased value on speed and skill will continue to happen, but fighting is still an important way to swing a game or playoff series momentum. As Rodney Dangerfield once famously said, "I went to a fight the other night and a hockey game broke out." Fighting is the key to the fabric of hockey, and while not as frequent as it once was, it will be an essential part of the sport for years to come.